March 7, 2017, arrived like an ordinary dawn for most of Washington. But inside CIA headquarters at Langley, it began as a slow-motion disaster. At 4 a.m., a junior analyst sat alone in a quiet office, fluorescent lights humming above him, a half-empty coffee growing cold beside his keyboard. His screen glowed in the dark, and at first he thought fatigue was playing tricks on his eyes. A stark headline stared back at him. WikiLeaks has just published the CIA's secret hacking tools. He refreshed the page, hoping it would vanish. Instead, it reloaded, clearer and even more terrifying. Thousands of classified documents were now available to anyone with an internet connection. Within minutes, phones began to vibrate across Langley. Senior officers were pulled from their beds. Emergency calls cut through the night. Meetings were convened before sunrise. What made the situation even more humiliating was this. The leak had not come from Russia, China, or Iran. It was not the work of a foreign intelligence service. The most damaging exposure in CIA cyber history had come from someone who once walked their own corridors, used their own computers, and sat inside their most secretive division. That man was Joshua Adam Schulte. From the outside, Joshua never fit the stereotype of a dangerous criminal. He was quiet, socially awkward, and more comfortable behind a screen than in a room full of people. Yet from childhood, his relationship with computers bordered on obsession. While other kids played games, he dismantled them. When others accepted technology as magic, he wanted to understand every hidden mechanism beneath it. By college, his talent was undeniable. Professors admired his technical brilliance, even when they found his personality difficult. He solved problems that left others stuck for days, and he wrote code with a speed that felt almost unnatural. In 2012, that brilliance caught the attention of the CIA, which was aggressively recruiting elite hackers. Joshua was selected for the Center for Cyber Intelligence, the agency's most secretive digital warfare unit. Inside this division, engineers were not just programmers. They were builders of invisible weapons. Their tools could penetrate smartphones without a trace, turn smart televisions into listening devices, activate laptop cameras remotely, and implant malware deep inside enemy networks. In essence, they were constructing the hidden machinery of modern espionage. At first, Joshua thrived in this environment. His technical skill made him valuable, and his work impressed many of his superiors. Yet as time passed, his attitude became a problem. He challenged authority constantly, dismissed colleagues he considered inferior, and reacted angrily to criticism. Co-workers later described him as someone who did not simply want to be respected, but needed to feel superior. The more talented he proved himself to be, the less willing he was to accept limits or oversight. By 2015, his relationship with the CIA had deteriorated badly. Joshua felt slighted in meetings, overlooked for promotions, and unfairly treated by his supervisors. Every decision that went against him felt like a personal betrayal. When he was removed from certain sensitive projects, he saw it not as a security precaution, but as humiliation. During this period of growing resentment, he began secretly copying classified material. He did not take random files. Instead, he targeted one of the most sensitive collections in U.S. intelligence, a massive trove of cyber weapons known as Vault 7. This archive contained real operational tools used by the CIA, including exploits for iPhones and Android devices, methods for bypassing security systems, and techniques that allowed digital attacks to be disguised as coming from other countries. Joshua downloaded enormous amounts of this information, carefully storing it outside the agency's systems. Crucially, he did not try to sell it. He did not flee to a rival nation. Instead, he chose a form of revenge that would wound the CIA far more deeply. He chose public exposure. In early 2017, WikiLeaks began publishing Vault 7 in a series of releases that shocked the world. Headlines exploded across international media. Articles warned that the CIA could hack ordinary phones, that smart TVS might secretly record conversations, and that America possessed digital weapons capable of global surveillance. Tech companies scrambled to respond. Apple, Google, and Samsung rushed to patch vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. Governments demanded explanations from Washington, and privacy activists condemned what they saw as evidence of unchecked power. Inside Langley, the mood shifted from shock to panic. The CIA was no longer viewed as an untouchable, omniscient agency. Instead, it appeared careless, exposed, and deeply compromised. Foreign governments openly criticized American cyber practices, and journalists treated the leak as proof of reckless overreach. Yet the most painful realization was that no external hacker could have accessed Vault 7. This had to be the work of someone inside their own walls. The FBI launched an exhaustive investigation. Agents examined who had access to the files, who had downloaded unusually large amounts of data, and who had personal conflicts within the agency. Digital trails were reconstructed, piece by piece, and slowly, suspicion narrowed toward Joshua Schulte. Investigators monitored his online activity and found indications that he had communicated with WikiLeaks. Rather than laying low, Joshua behaved in ways that suggested defiance. He posted cryptic messages on the internet and made remarks hinting that he knew more than others. In 2018, federal agents arrested him. The news reverberated across the country. A former CIA engineer, once trusted with America's most sensitive cyber weapons, was now accused of orchestrating one of the largest intelligence leaks in U.S. history. During his trial, prosecutors portrayed him as bitter, unstable, and driven by vengeance. They argued that he was not a whistleblower seeking truth, but an employee determined to punish his former employer. Evidence of his anger toward the agency, his arrogance, and his long-running conflicts with supervisors formed the backbone of their case. Joshua insisted he was innocent, claiming he had been framed and that someone else inside the CIA must have been responsible. Yet the digital evidence against him proved overwhelming. In 2022, a jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. The brilliant engineer who once helped build America's digital arsenal would now spend most of his life behind bars. Still, the story does not end with his conviction. The Vault 7 leak raised uncomfortable questions that continue to echo today. It revealed that the CIA possessed tools capable of intruding into the private lives of ordinary citizens, blurring the line between national security and surveillance. It also demonstrated that the greatest vulnerabilities of powerful institutions often come from within. No foreign hacker, no matter how skilled, could have caused the same level of damage. Only someone who was trusted could access such secrets. Even the world's most sophisticated intelligence agency proved susceptible to betrayal from inside its own ranks. That realization unsettled not just the CIA, but governments and corporations around the globe. As a result, many agencies strengthened internal security, monitored employee behavior more closely, and re-examined how much access any single individual should have to classified information. Yet no system can be perfectly secure, especially when it relies on human beings. Today, Joshua Schulte sits in a federal prison cell, cut off from the world he once helped shape. The CIA has rebuilt much of its cyber infrastructure, and tech companies have patched many of the vulnerabilities exposed by Vault 7. Still, fragments of those tools continue to circulate in hidden corners of the internet. Somewhere, perhaps in another government lab or defense contractor office, another brilliant engineer might be feeling the same emotions that once consumed Joshua. Anger, frustration, and a sense of betrayal can slowly transform a gifted employee into a dangerous insider. For intelligence agencies, that possibility remains a haunting thought. They know that the next major leak may not come from a foreign adversary, but from someone already inside their walls. The story of Joshua Schulte stands as a stark reminder that intelligence without restraint can invite disaster, and that even the most powerful institutions can be undone by the people they trust the most. And yet the ripples of Vault 7 continued far beyond courtrooms and headlines. In quiet conference rooms across Silicon Valley, engineers began designing devices with a new kind of paranoia built in. Encryption became stronger, permissions tighter, and surveillance capabilities more transparent. Not because governments wanted them to, but because public trust had been shaken. At the same time, inside intelligence agencies, a colder atmosphere settled in. Co-workers who once debated openly now spoke in whispers. Trust, once assumed, had to be constantly proven. Some talented young hackers chose private companies over government service, fearing that one misstep could ruin their careers or that moral conflict might trap them in impossible choices. Meanwhile, online conspiracy theories multiplied. Some claimed Schulte was a hero. Others insisted he was part of a larger plot. In reality, his story was more human and more tragic than either narrative. It was the story of brilliance corroded by ego, of secrecy colliding with conscience, and of a system that failed to notice a breaking man until it was too late. Former CIA officers would later admit that Vault 7 forced them to rethink not just security but culture. They realized that treating people as replaceable cogs could turn frustration into rebellion. The lesson was uncomfortable but clear. Technology is powerful, but people are more unpredictable. As years passed, students in cybersecurity classes began studying Vault 7, not as gossip, but as a case study in ethics, power, and risk. Professors asked a difficult question. Was the greater danger the existence of such tools or the lack of accountability around them? Back in his prison cell, Joshua Schulte remained largely silent. Occasional letters leaked out describing a man who believed he had been wronged, yet also knew his choices had crossed a line. His life had become a permanent warning label for anyone tempted to take justice into their own hands. And so, the story circles back to that early morning in Langley, to a single blinking screen and a cold cup of coffee, to the moment when secrecy shattered in an instant. The CIA survived, the world moved on, and the internet forgot much of the outrage. But beneath the surface, nothing was ever quite the same. Because every keyboard in every secure room now carries the same unspoken truth. The greatest threat is not always outside the walls. It can be sitting quietly inside them, just a few keystrokes away. And if you want to know how a Russian man stole American nuclear secrets, watch this video and subscribe to Dark Protocol for more.